Hi, I'm Steve. You can call me Steve. Since I've now covered two of the four fundamental forces of the universe, I may as well carry on and cover the other two. This episode is about gravity, because I think I need a running start to wrap my mind around the weak nuclear interaction. Put overly simply, gravity is this. It's what makes things fall down. And just like everything else I've ever talked about in Science Isn't Scary, there's a lot more going on than just that. I'm sure you've heard, or at least heard of, the story about Newton and the apple. Supposedly, Isaac Newton was napping under an apple tree when an apple fell on his head. That event gave him the idea for the concept of gravity and possibly a mild headache. That story is almost certainly false, at least the aspect of him getting hit in the head. Newton himself did tell a story about walking in his garden, seeing an apple fall across the way, and pondering how gravity worked. It didn't spring into his head as a fully formed concept. It took him about 20 years to sort out the details and work out the math. Gravity itself was a known phenomenon. People have been dropping things since forever. Scholars in Greece, India, the Middle East, and probably other places have been debating the nature of gravity for a couple of thousand years before Newton's time. His novel contributions to the field were the notions that objects attract other objects along a line passing through their center of mass, and that when the apple fell down to the earth fell upwards one tiny iota towards the apple. Before Newton, there was Galileo. He gets popular credit for showing that objects fall at the same rate regardless of mass. But there were dozens of other scholars doing similar experiments before him and contemporary with him, and reaching the same conclusion. Do you want to see it again? The notion that heavier things fall faster seems intuitive, especially when you compare a feather to an anvil. It's also so intuitive that most people don't even think about it, which is why several someones had to drop cannonballs off towers repeatedly to establish that yes, heavy things fall at the same rate as light things. Gravity is the reason large objects exist. The early universe was a void filled with gas. Points that had slightly more gas than the surroundings attracted even more gas to them through gravity and became the first galaxies. Higher density points within these newly forming galaxies also attracted more gas to themselves, which eventually formed the first stars. Those stars burned merrily for a while, then exploded to make dust. That dust went through the same gravity-assisted accretion process as the gas and formed rocky planets. And some of those rocky planets got big enough to attract and hold gases like oxygen and nitrogen, again through gravity. Without gravity, there'd be nothing for us to breathe, but it wouldn't matter because we wouldn't have any ground to stand on and wouldn't actually exist in the first place. Okay, that's what gravity does. But it doesn't explain what gravity is. That's a difficult question to answer succinctly when it comes to fundamental forces. Briefly, gravity is what happens when you have mass. Put enough matter together and gravity starts to get noticeable. Things with gravity attract other things with gravity. In fact, the two things get pulled together. That's difficult to see when we're living on a giant ball of matter, because the Earth is so massive compared to anything we could drop on it that the effect on the Earth is impossible to discern. But we can watch objects in the sky moving around one another and see the effects of the gravity of the planets on their moons and asteroids and stray comets. We orbit the sun because the sun's gravity holds us in place. So why do we go around in circles and not fall directly in? That's another video entirely and a lot of math as well. Gravity even affects things that don't have mass, like electromagnetic radiation. Light passing by a massive object will bend into a new path. Unless the object is really, really massive, this is hard to see, but it is observable with precise enough instruments. During a solar eclipse, observations of stars very close to the sun's disk, normally invisible in the glare, are just slightly out of position compared to where they should be. The light coming from them has been nudged into a new direction by passing so close to the sun, and they appear to be in a different location. This is also how we know dark matter exists. We can see the light of distant galaxies being distorted by closer galaxies that are in the way. which gives us an estimate of how much mass those nearer galaxies must have, and is much higher than the mass of the glowy bits we can detect and measure. Get enough gravity in one place, and things get really weird. Black holes are collapsed stars with all of their mass compressed down into a painfully small volume. They're ridiculously dense, and the gravity arising from that much dense matter is so intense that not even light can get out. That's why they're called black holes, because we can't see them directly, just their effects on nearby objects. Gravity is the attraction of matter to other matter. It holds the solar system together, and it keeps you grounded. Without it, there'd be no ground to stand on, just a universe full of free-floating gas and dust. And now I'll leave you with this week's padding, public domain swing music. Thanks for watching. I've been Steve.